I'm Siraj Khan, lecturer in English Cast. Welcome to my subject, Shakespearean Studies. Our course code is English 4262 and it's our lecture number 17. Today we are talking about Shakespeare's comedies. Traditionally, Shakespeare plays are categorized as comedy, history, romance, and tragedy, with some additional categories proposed over the years. Shakespeare comedies are rather the plays of Shakespeare that are usually categorized as comedies are generally identifiable as plays full of fun, irony, and dazzling wordplay. They also abound in disguises and mistaken identities with very convoluted plots that are difficult to follow with very contrived endings. Any attempt at describing Shakespeare's comedy plays as a cohesive group can't go beyond that superficial outline. The highly contrived endings of most Shakespeare comedies are the clue to what these plays, all very different, are about. Let's take a look at the outlines of today's lecture. Comedy, especially Shakespearean comedies, its legacy, its structure, the characters of Shakespearean comedies, its main features, the motives behind the comedies, and theme. And one of his romantic comedy as Twelfth Night. The plays of William Shakespeare were grouped into comedies, histories, and tragedies. Although the phrase William Shakespeare's comedies brings certain definite association, it must not be supposed that it covers all the comedies of Shakespeare. Shakespeare's art as a writer of comedies, in fact, underwent a more far-reaching development than his practice in the tragedies, especially. And Shakespeare began by providing something in the manner of the comic vogue set in by the reigning dramatists of the day, the university wits especially. Shakespeare's earlier comedies are in a completely different vein from his mature work. The first comedy, like the Love's Labour's Last, is, for example, witty and satirical in a clever way. The Comedy of Errors is still more unlike the typical Shakespearean comedies, for it is farcical and gives a place to fundraising incidents. The first comedy which has the genuine coloring of Shakespearean comedy is A Midsummer Night's Dream, though even this play is untypical to the extent that the supernatural figures so largely in it. In addition to this play, The Midsummer Night's Dream, the finest examples of Shakespearean comedy are As You Like It, Twelfth Night, and Much Ado About Nothing. These are the finest examples of Shakespearean comedies. At a certain stage, Shakespeare's comedies begin to be overshadowed by the serious and the tragic. This is discernible towards the close of The Merchant of Venice. For example, it has the love and relationship element, as is often the case. There are two couples. One of the woman is disguised as a man through most of the text, typical of Shakespearean comedy, but the other is in a very unpleasant situation. A young Jewess seduced away from her father by a shallow, rather dull young Christian. The play ends with the lovers all together as usual, celebrating their love and the way things have turned out well for their group. That resolution has come about by completely destroying a man's life. Like the Jews, talking about the Merchant of Venice. Shylock is a man who has made a mistake and been forced to pay dearly for it by losing everything he values, including his religious freedom. These are the comedies Shakespeare wrote. All's Well That Ends Well, As You Like It. The Comedy of Errors is believed to be Shakespeare's earliest comedy, written around 1592. Cymbeline, Love's Labour's Last, Measure for Measure, Merchant of Venice, The Merry Wives of Windsor, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Much Ado About Nothing, Pericles, Prince of Tyre, Taming of the Shrew, The Tempest, Twelfth Night, The Two Gentlemen of Verona, The Winter's Tale. Like Shakespeare's 14 comedies are the most difficult to classify because they overlap in style with other genres. Critics often describe some plays as tragic comedies because they mix equal measures of tragedy and comedy. Like if we see Much Ado About Nothing. Because of his humanist education, Shakespeare was familiar with classical Greek and Latin comedy. Like there was, for the most part of the comedies of both the contemporaries and the successors of Shakespeare, conform to the type established in Shakespeare's mature comedies. However, there was also a rival tradition of which Ben Jonson was the champion. Jonson's comedies are neoclassical, they are witty, satirical, and didactic. They are neatly and symmetrically constructed. They have little place for love and humor. They embody a conception of character which has come to be known as that of humors. Like Johnsonian comedy is generally referred to as the comedy of humors, in spite of the fact that his greatest play, Walpole, does not belong to this class. Shakespearean comedies, there we are having love and adventures. And if we look at the range of Shakespearean comedy, so it covers all the comedies of Shakespeare. His art as a writer of comedies, in fact, underwent a more far-reaching development than his practice in tragedies. The Latin comedies of Terence and another Roman poet, Plautus, 258 to 184 BC, were studied in Elizabethan schools. Its structure. From Terence and Plautus, Shakespeare learned how to organize a plot in a way modern editors may represent is a five-act structure. First of all, a situation with tensions or implicit conflict, like exposition. The second, that is implicit conflict, is developed, the rising action. The third, that is the turning point. The conflict reaches height, frequently an impasse, like the turning point of the play. Things begin to clear up, like falling action. In the fifth one, that is the conclusion, problem is resolved, knots untied. The conflict, the obstacles, and the solution of conflict, it leads to, if the diagram here, it shows that the conflicts are being solved. Shakespearean comedy is, we are having Apollonian and Dionysian conflict, the green world structure, city, court to forest, Apollonian, and this is a tree diagram of the structure of the comedies of Shakespeare. From the works of Plautus and Terence, Shakespeare learned to use certain stock characters like the prodigal youth and his female love interest, blocking figures who provide the obstacle to be overcome, the cynics, a parent or guardian of the hero or heroine in the play, the shrewish wife, the pedant, the braggart soldier, the miles glorious, the parasite, the clowns, outlaws, clever servants, female confident. Comedy is set in imaginary country, area where is similar to a fairy tale. In the characters are true to life, especially is. But here, Shakespearean comedies are marked by the essential traits of romanticism, that is, love and adventure. Some of them also bring in a note of the exotic, where they're sitting in far off lands. The world they depict is, in some respects, an idealized one, for it is free from the worries of the workaday world. The lovers can lie unperturbed under the greenwood tree, or maintain that they will hear music, the food of love, till they are suffocated with it. In Shakespeare comedies, female heroines are usually more important than male heroes. Like Shakespeare's tragedies in comedies differ sharply in one respect. Tragedy is the man's sphere, whereas comedy is by and large the sphere of the woman. Like many of the heroes of Shakespeare comedies are rather poor creatures when compared with the vivacious girls with whom they are paired. For example, Orlando in a non-entity when compared with Rosalind. However, Benedict in Much Ado About Nothing is almost like a match for Beatrice, and Theseus is A Midsummer Night's Dream is much more than a match for Hippolyta. This characteristic of Shakespearean comedy was first noted by Ruskin, who went to the extent of saying that Shakespeare's comedies have no heroes, they have only heroines. George Gordon also has, in his essay on Shakespearean comedy, dwelt on this aspect of Shakespeare's comic productions. He observes, it is true of most Shakespeare's comedies, it is of daily life that where woman is. There also probably is the root and heart of the matter, and his portraits of women have never been surpassed. Women of all ranks and ages, from the queen to the dairymaid, from the 50 to 15. The best of artists have their limits, but in this bright particular region, Shakespeare would appear to have none. But in Shakespearean time, men played all the roles, even female ones, as the women were not allowed to perform on the stage. In characters, we can see many mistakes and faults. The new world that Shakespeare created in his comedies, a blend of fantasy and realism, is hinted at in the title of several of these plays. Like thus, one of them is named As You Like It. It is as if to tell the spectators that here is the world in which they have always wished to live, made a living reality. Another of the comedies is named Twelfth Night, after the gay festival, and carries the subtitle What You Will. Except for Assembly, none of the comedies is named after a character, thus making it clear that the world of the comedies stresses interrelationship rather than individuals is that of the tragedies. In the last group of Shakespeare comedies, of which The Tempest is representative, like we can see the influence of the romantic comedies of Beaumont and Fletcher. It is not without significance that Shakespeare began with history plays, many of which have a large infusion of the comic, moved on to regular comedy, and then after writing some of the most powerful tragedies in the world, return to comedy. This lends weight to the conjecture that Shakespeare's real bent of mind was for the comic rather than the tragic. The motives behind his comedies was the right of an individual to free choice of love. In the second one, the contrast between the appearance and reality. Shakespeare's comedies are accompanied by music, and sometimes actors play music instrument by themselves. Songs are often sung by a jester or a fool, parallel the events of the plot. The main theme in Shakespeare's comedies is romantic love, friendship, and its main features are a struggle of old haters to overcome difficulty often presented by young people. Is like Shakespearean tragedy. Shakespeare's comedies marks the summit of achievement of English drama. As Dr. Johnson, for all his love for Shakespeare tragedy, ultimately ranked the comedies as higher, there is more than one modern critic who would subscribe to this view. It is even maintained that Shakespeare's real bent of mind was comic. Tragedy was but an episode in his career which culminated in romantic comedies like The Tempest. Separation and unification, mistaken identities, a clever servant, heightened tensions often within a couple is like in Twelfth Night is similar like the humiliation of a man in group doesn't like is in the Merchant of Venice. His suffering is simply shrugged off in the highly contrived comic endings. Not one of Shakespearean comedy, no matter how full of life and love and laughter and joy it may be, is without a darkness is at its heart. Like Much Ado About Nothing, like Antony and Cleopatra, a tragedy with a comic structure. Shakespeare seamlessly joins an ancient mythological love story and a modern invented one, weaving them together into a very funny drama in which light and dark chase each other around like clouds and sunshine, and on a windy day in the play threatens to fall into an abyss at any moment and emerges from that danger in a highly contrived endings once again. Like the tragedies, Shakespeare comedies defy categorization. They all draw our attention to a range of human experience with all its sadness, joy, poignancy, tragedy, comedy, darkness, and lightness. Below are all of generally regarded as we discussed all his comedies. One intervening plot and frequent punning in Twelfth Night is a wonderful romantic comedy which was named after the 12th night Christmas holiday. The date of composition of Twelfth Night is not known. It is moreover one of those plays which were not published singly. Twelfth Night was first published so far as records go in 1623 in the first folio edition of Shakespeare's plays. There is no indication that the comedy had been previously issued as a quarto edition, but its date goes into 1601. Probable date of composition of Twelfth Night is 1601. The play does not figure in the list of Shakespeare's works given by Mayers in his Palladis Tamia, which was published in the autumn of 1598. But it was performed between 1599 and 1601. Contains basic themes like divided twins, mistaken identity, true love, conquering, and gender crossing, and love madness. Its characters Orsino is a strong nobleman who lives in the country of Illyria. He is madly in love with the gorgeous lady Olivia. The second character we are having Viola is a young upper class woman, and the main character of the play. She represents herself as a man, Cesario, and goes to work for Orsino and falls in love. We are having another female character as Olivia, the good-looking, wealthy, and noble woman who lived in Illyria. Orsino was especially in love with her. Is the opening lines: if music is the food of love, give me access of that. Please play on. Thank you very much and good luck. It's a happy ending.